Okay, so this video lecture is for our module number 6. So this is entitled The Expenditure Cycle Part 2, the Payroll Processing and Fixed Asset Procedures. For our content, so we will be discussing about the conceptual payroll system, the physical payroll system, and the conceptual fixed asset system. Okay, so to start with, let us discuss about the conceptual payroll system. Payroll processing usually is a special case purchase system because in this case, the organization purchases or pays for the labor rather than the raw materials of the finished goods for resale. So the nature of our payroll processing will create the need for specialized procedures as well. In this procedure, so the personnel department will be one of the most important department, okay, that will be included in this process, or this is also known as the HR or human resource department. So the personnel department will prepare and submit the personnel action forms to the or in preparation of our payroll. So this is their function. So these documents will identify the employees authorized to receive the paycheck, and this is also used to reflect changes in hourly pay rates, payroll deductions, and job classifications. For production department, so of course this is where the process takes place in which the workers or employees render their services for wages. So production employees prepare two types of time records. So they usually use the job tickets and time cards. When we say job tickets, this will capture the time that the individual workers spend on each production job. And cost accounting uses these documents to allocate our direct labor charges to work in process account. Time cards, on the other hand, will capture the time the employee is at work. So these are sent to prepare the payroll function for calculating the amount of the employee's paycheck. So each day, at the beginning of their shift, the employees place their time cards in a special clock that will record their time in and time out. So typically, they clock out for lunch at the end of their shift in the afternoon or in the evening, depending on their schedule. So this time card is the formal record of their daily attendance. At the end of the week, the supervisor will review, will sign and send these time cards to the payroll department for processing our or the payment of their salaries and wages. So here we will update the work in process account. After cost accounting allocates the labor cost to the work in process accounts, so the charges are summarized in our labor distribution summary, and it will be forwarded to the general ledger department or function. So how to prepare the payroll? So here the payroll department will receive the pay rate and withholding data from the personnel department and hours work data from the production department. So here, a clerk in the payroll department will perform the following tasks to process this. He will prepare the payroll register, which will include the gross pay, the deductions, any overtime pay, and the net pay of the worker. Second is to enter this information into the employee payroll records. Third, he will prepare the employee paychecks. Another is he will send the paychecks to the distribute paycheck function. Okay, so normally there is someone who will be assigned to distribute the paychecks. So this is a different personnel, okay, for segregation of duties. And finally, he will file the time cards, personal action form, and a copy of the payroll register. So that's that's the process a clerk in the payroll department will perform, okay, to process the payment. So we also have here the diagram which shows, okay, what we have illustrate or described. Okay, in or upon the distribution of the paycheck, so usually there is a form of payroll fraud okay, that will involve, especially in submitting time cards for non-existing employees. So they are also known as ghost employees, meaning if the entity is having a loose internal control over their payroll processing, so there might be some non-existing employees that they will pay for. Okay, so to prevent this, many companies will use paymaster. Okay, so he will be the one to distribute the paychecks to the employees. So here, this individual is independent, okay, from the payroll process. This is to emphasize the segregation of duties, okay, and also not involved in payroll authorization or preparation tasks. So his only responsibility is to distribute the paychecks. If a valid employee does not claim the paycheck, so the paymaster will return the check to the payroll. So the reason the check went unclaimed can be investigated. So they can detect whether there is claims for non-existing employees. So what about for accounts payable? Here, the accounts payable clerk will review the payroll register for correctness and prepares the copies of the cash disbursement voucher for the amount of the payroll to be paid to the workers or employees. So the clerk records the voucher in a voucher register, and then they will submit this voucher packet, meaning it will include the voucher and the payroll register to the cash disbursements. So here, a copy of disbursement voucher is sent to the general ledger function for updating. Okay, so normally in payroll, before the wages will be paid, the entity will set up wages and salaries payable first. Okay, especially if the report falls in between or before, the payment of the salary. So they have to already account, and they will recognize that they have the liability for the workers for that time and the day that they already rendered, okay, in their services. What about for the cash disbursement department? So upon the voucher or upon the receipt of the voucher packet from the accounts payable, so the cash department's function will prepare a single check for the entire amount of the payroll, and then this will be deposited in the payroll impressed account of the entity. So here, the employee paychecks are drawn on this account. So this account is only for the payment of the salaries to the employees. Okay, so this is also used only for payroll. Funds must be transferred from the general cash account to this impressed account before the paychecks can be cashed. Okay, so that meaning before they can withdraw, there is already a fund to it. The clerks will send us a copy of the check along with the disbursement voucher and the payroll register to the accounts payable department. So they will where they are filed. So in this case, this means that the salaries and wages are already paid, so they will close the account for the wages and salaries payable. Finally, a journal voucher is prepared and will be sent to the general ledger for updating. So for the general ledger, here they will receive the labor distribution summary from the cost accounting, and then the disbursement voucher from the accounts payable, and the journal voucher from cash disbursement. So with this information, the general ledger clerk will make the following accounting entries to update and to record these transactions. So from the labor distribution summary, so the entry will be debit to work in process for the direct labor, another debit for factory overhead for indirect labor, and credit to wages payable. So this is the setting up of the recognition of their liability to pay for the wages of their workers. So from the disbursement voucher, so in this case, this is already the payment of the salaries. Okay, so that's why our entry here is to debit wages payable, meaning it's already paid, and we will credit the cash, income tax withholding, group insurance, pension, union dues. So these are the liability, or the amount of the amount, I mean, that will be taken from the salary of the employee, and it will be remitted by the entity to the different, or to the corresponding agencies. Okay, that's why it's labeled as payable account. These are normally the deduction from the salaries of the workers for their contribution for the insurance, pension, union dues, and of course withholding taxes. So that will be the entry, okay, for the general ledger to update the wages payable account. For the payroll controls, so here the transaction should be authorized, of course. So a form of payroll fraud will involve submitting time cards for employees who no longer work for the firm, aside from the ghost employees who is non-existing. Okay, so to prevent this, the personal action form will help the payroll department to keep the employee records current. So this document will describe the additions, deletions, and other changes to the employee file, and they will act as an important authorization control to ensure that only the time cards of the current and valid employees will be processed. So this is very important to avoid providing or paying salaries for non-existing employees. Segregation of duties. So the timekeeping function and the personal functions should be separated. So this is actually been emphasized in the previous discussion. Okay, so the personal function will provide the payroll with pay rate information for authorized hourly employees. And typically, an organization will offer a range also of valid pay rates. This can be based on the experience, jobs, classification, seniority, and merit. So meaning this is their compensation computation of the compensation of the workers. Okay, of how much they will receive as payment for their services. So if the production or timekeeping department provided this information, an employee might submit a higher rate and perpetrate a fraud. So that's why it's very important that there should be an authorization and control that should be maintained to avoid also this overpayment of salaries. So for purposes of operational efficiency, the payroll function will perform several tasks. So some of these are contradictory, however. So, but because of basic internal control, this will be limited or prevented. So, for example, the payroll function has both asset custody, meaning the employee paychecks, and they also record, or they have the record keeping responsibility. So they keep and update the employee's payroll records. So this is the equivalent in the general purchases system, assigning the accounts payable and cash disbursements responsibility to only one person. So to segregate this conflicting function, so the key aspect here in this case, the key aspect of the payroll transaction between accounts payable and cash disbursement function will return or will be to control these processes to avoid such contradicting functions. So in this case, the accounts payable will review the work done by the payroll, meaning the accounts payable department will review the payroll register and approve the payment. And then the cash disbursement will write the check, okay, to cover the total payroll payment. And none of the employee paychecks is negotiable instrument until the payroll check is deposited into the impressed account. Meaning here, it is very important that an allocated amount for the impressed fund should be kept. Okay, so because the purpose of this is to have these checks drawn and encashed from this account. Okay, for supervision, sometimes employees will clock in for another worker. This is the problem, okay, because their coworkers might be late or absent. So in this case, the supervisor should observe the timekeeping process and reconcile their time cards with actual attendance to avoid this fraud. In terms of record or accounting records, so the audit trail for payroll will include the following documents. So we will have the time cards, the job tickets, and disbursement vouchers. Journal information also, which comes from the labor distribution summary and the payroll register, will be used. Another is the subsidiary ledger account, which contains the employee records and various expense accounts related to the salaries and wages. And fourth is the general ledger accounts. So this includes our payroll control, the cash, and the payroll clearing or our imprest account. In terms of access controls, so here the assets associated with the payroll systems normally are labor and cash. Okay, so both can be misappropriated through improper access of the accounting record, and especially for cash account. Okay, so a dishonest individual can misrepresent the number of hours worked on the time cards and thus embezzle the cash. Similarly, control over access to all journals, ledgers, and source documents in the payroll system is important. So as it is in all expenditure cycle system as well. So that's why limited access is very important, as well as segregation of duties to avoid such fraud to occur. In terms of independent verification, so we have here the following examples, okay, for the payroll system. First, there should be a verification of time, meaning before sending the time cards to the payroll department, the supervisor must verify first their accuracy and sign them to make sure that correct time and rate will be computed and paid to the corresponding employee. Second, there should be a paymaster who is an independent person from other department, and his only responsibility is to distribute the checks. Okay, so he is a different person from the supervisor. So this will help to verify the existence of the employees, meaning only those who are existing and current employees will be claiming their checks. So the supervisor may be part of the payroll fraud if there is no paymaster, because here the supervisor may pretend to distribute paychecks to non-existing employees. So that's why distribution and authorization should be segregated into different employees. Third, for accounts payable, the AP clerk will verify the accuracy of the payroll register before creating a disbursement voucher. So after they verify that it's correct, then that is the time that they will transfer the funds to the imprest account. And fourth, for the general ledger, so here the general ledger department will provide verification of the overall process by reconciling the labor distribution summary and the payroll disbursement voucher. Okay, and to update the books of accounts related to the payroll transactions. So those are for the conceptual payroll system.